One of the perks of my job is I get to work out at a billion different places. But one of the cool things is one of my offices that I work out of has its own gym. So I'm going to do a bit of a workout here before I get into some calls, some training calls, as well as just doing some paperwork, boring shit. But one of the things that I'm currently dealing with in my career is trying to find good salespeople. And it's no secret for all two of you who've watched my first handful of videos on this channel that I really look at sales very similar to my love of boxing. And I think there's a lot of things that are very similar to both of them. And one of the things that I've realized that I really, really appreciate about boxing is how much it forces you to be so self-focused on everything that you're doing. A lot of people just assume that boxing is just punching and hitting people and it's almost like a brainless sport, but that's absolutely not the case. There is almost something meditative about boxing where you self-monitor your minor movements, your minor pivots, your punches, the angles, the strategy that you think the opponent's going to throw at you. And in a lot of ways, it's very much like chess, but with fists. And one of the things that really ties in neatly with sales and finding good salespeople that I've realized just over the years of hiring, firing, and onboarding, more than I can count at this point, is that good salespeople have a high level of self-monitoring, or if you really want to look at it more deeply or look at the psychology behind it, it would be referred to as metacognition. So thinking about thinking. One of the things that elite level boxers can do is think about what they're doing on the fly in a very intuitive way. And in a lot of ways, it almost looks natural to them, but they understand when things aren't working or when they have to make that pivot or that move. And good salespeople are very similar. One of the things about sales is that oftentimes you get a couple different camps or a couple different pools of salespeople. And what I mean by that is you'll get some guys who they're good talkers, so they sound charming, but they're not very self-aware. And then you get some guys who just generally have some sort of industry experience that makes them okay. And then you get some salespeople, and these tend to be the more exceptional ones, who deeply reflect on every sales appointment, scenario, encounter that they face, and try to work on those deficits. And they essentially self-monitor what's happening. Right now, I've been training sales for a long time. I've also was a salesperson for quite a while as well. And one of the things that really got me from point A to point B in terms of going from being okay to really, really good was being conscientious of the things that I did in the house, things that I did in front of the customer, said to the customer. And it got to a point where I would record myself in the house. I would go ahead and listen back to the tape or my recordings and see where did I slip up? What did I do wrong? What didn't seem to land? To keep myself mindful of where I was weak so I could get stronger. And in a lot of ways, boxing is very similar. I personally, I like to record some cool reels to look like, wow, this guy actually half knows what he's doing. But realistically, I do that to check, are my bad habits still there? Am I not monitoring certain habits enough? I know that sometimes in sparring, I drop this hand when I get excited too much, and I pay the price for it. But in the moment, I don't necessarily realize that. But it gives me that level of awareness next time when I'm doing it, that I know that I need to keep that hand where it needs to be so I don't get rocked in the head. And good salespeople do the exact same thing. And when I was getting very good at sales, getting very good at essentially closing jobs over and over and over again, one of the things that really separated me from some of the more mediocre or bad salespeople was I reflected on every appointment, good or bad. And I reflected to see, was I keeping my hand up when I needed to, or was I dropping it when it mattered most? And that was something that in sales made me quite good. Very good, actually. And I'm being a little cocky in this, but it's true. I got very good at that, I'm going to call it a discipline. And that was oftentimes because I would reflect on recorded demos that I did. I would put detailed notes and breakdowns of where I thought I faltered. And ultimately, I would use that to keep myself mindful the next time I went into a house or the next time I faced that same scenario, so I didn't slip up again. So one of the biggest traits that I really consider when it comes to finding good salespeople, and it's one of the harder things to ascertain, but is trying to understand, Do they have a high level of metacognition? Do they learn from their failures? Do they understand where they're weak, where they're strong, and do they monitor for these things? Now, there is a downside to this. Some salespeople that I've encountered who have they spend too much time focusing on their weaknesses or focusing on monitoring their actions, they get a level of analysis paralysis. And that is the downside to it. In some cases, that can break certain salespeople because, especially in my position and what I do, I train commission-only salespeople. So if you have a guy overthinking every scenario and never selling, that might put them into a position where they just simply can't get better. Right? There has to be a healthy mix to this. And to put it into perspective, when I first started inspiring, I had a lot of that. I'd overthink the whole scenario, overthink every movement to the point that I just couldn't even perform the basics that I did know at the time. And that made me really bad. And I had to get over that hump. But one of the things that I always look at, and unfortunately, I find it harder to ascertain this through the interview process. There's a couple key questions you can ask, but again, a lot of people put on a different persona, not a different persona, but they put on their best face in some cases and don't fully explain certain things. In other words, they embellish a bit. So it's very hard, I find, in the interview process to gauge exactly how much metacognition they have. I find that when I test out a new sales rep, I have him running his first handful of leads. I like to see how he responds. How is he managing that lead? How is he in our CRM system or our software? How is he going into that system, and is he putting in his sparring footage? Is he putting in notes or his recorded parts of his pitches to try to get better for the next appointment? And those are things that I look for. And typically sales reps that I see that can do those things, who can make themselves vulnerable, who aren't afraid to question what they're doing, thinking about the things that they're doing, I find that those sales reps tend to be once they get a good understanding of everything that they're supposed to be doing, I find that those guys tend to become exceptional.